Hi, I'm Bruce Howard, Chair of Waiuku Family Support Network. Our organisation has been going 35 years and it's a wonderful, proud history, and we're celebrating it this year. And part of our celebration is to capture stories of the people who have contributed so much to make it an amazing organisation that it is. It is also part of our launching of the fundraising for our new building to create a bigger landmark and footprint of the bicultural journey that Waiuku and surrounds are going to journey on. So I ask you to take time to listen to these stories. There's some incredible people that we're going to be chatting to over the next period of time, and they put pictures of words to bring the organisation alive. Our first podcast that we did today was with Sue Ushaw, who was the founder of getting Waiuku Family Support into existence. She downplays her importance in lots of ways, but it was interesting to hear the foundation stones of what the organisation was meant to be about, and that we still hold those same foundations as the principles that would drive us forward every day as an organisation. So this is a proud part of Waiuku's history, and I pray that you will take the time to listen to it and journey and embrace what we're saying.
I applied for a job at Waimakoia School for emotionally disturbed children, and had that job, and then, went back to university and finished my degree, and started on a master's, and that's when our first little boy was introduced to our family.
Right.
And he was from our wider whānau. So when I compared being a mother with doing a master's degree, there wasn't much choice, really.
Being a mother is a master's degree.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, we were living in Bucklands Beach at that stage. I applied after the work that I was doing at Waimakoia to Leslie Centre and got a job there, and trained as a family therapist. And we actually went and lived at the Leslie Centre on a flat attached to the Leslie Centre for some time, and then bought our property on the peninsula. So, sort of talking about our progress as a family. My applying for a job at New World gave me a Saturday away from the children. It gave my husband the job of looking after the children on a Saturday, and it actually paid for our food. So it was in that position that I could see that people were really struggling with their children. And hey, like having 3 children under 4 was no picnic, particularly going shopping with them. So I knew that I had some knowledge around ways of helping parents manage children, and that in some ways it seems silly to be sitting on that knowledge, and it wasn't around sort of saying, hey, I know everything. It was around these things that I think I could do.
Yes.
So in talking to Jeanette, we, on the daycare committee, we started talking about what we could do. And basically we looked at what she could provide and what I could provide, and how we could begin to gather community together, and how we could gather Māori community as well as Pākehā community, so that there was a sense that this would be a community hub that could be used by everyone.
So it really started, from what I'm hearing, as a bicultural thing from dot one.
Yeah, well, that's what we...
That's neat.
That's what we aimed for.
Fantastic.
We called community meetings and looked at it. I think I sort of said to you just before that the kaupapa was that everybody had something to give. And then sort of looking at what could people give. So we started off, first of all, with, I think it was just a helpline. And the helpline was open, I believe, from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And we had people manning that helpline.
Right.
And just volunteers, because there was no Citizens Advice Bureau here in Waiuku. And
there never has been, has there?
No, not that I'm aware of. So it was around looking at what the community needed, and the things that came out hugely was budgeting, food bank, parenting.
Still the same big issues today.
Yep, drug and alcohol.
Yep.
Yeah, and so hence we sort of started with volunteers, talked to them about, this is not about giving advice. This is about hearing someone, listening to what the problem is, and then looking at, what resources we did have. And it was sort of from that helpline that we then ended up with a small room upstairs. Don't even know if I could tell you which room it was.
Which building?
I don't know.
Is that above where Ray White's real estate is now? That's one of the... but I don't know factually whether that's...
It was further up near the grocery store. Look, I can't even remember.
Wow.
But, because it is 35 years ago. But, we ended up with a small room and started using that for meetings, and then over time really grew that.
So how did you get the funding to do all of that?
Well, we didn't have any funding to begin with. And Jeanette looked at community funding, got some community funding.
Right.
I did just a little of family therapy, parenting really more than anything, and people paid when they could. And it soon became very aware that it was a small community, and I actually didn't want to be working with any families where my children were going to school or going to end up going to school. So over time, before our daughter ended up going to school when she was about 4.5, Leslie Centre approached me to come back to work. And at that stage I was, my son was in school, our first son was in school, our second son was at kindy, our daughter was in the daycare centre, so it was sort of 3 different areas. And I went on to the board at Waipipi, the first time we had boards in primary schools. And because I trained as a teacher, but also worked at Waimakoia School, the headmaster there said, could you come and do some special needs work? So I went in sort of when our daughter and son were in daycare, and did some special needs work with a young boy that was in the school. And then when Leslie Centre approached me, I sort of thought about it a lot and then decided I'd go back. And I really had to make a decision at that stage. Would I go back into special needs teaching, or would I move back into family therapy? And the decision was made that I'd go back into family therapy. So it was pretty difficult with 3 children being in 3 different places.
The logistics alone would be nightmarish.
And the travelling.
Yes.
And by that stage, they moved to Manukau Road from Meadowbank, which is where they were. And very quickly, I started talking to them about, hey, what you need is hubs.
Yes.
You know, the reality is that there are families in Newmarket and Central Auckland getting the help, but families in South Auckland aren't getting the help. And I mean, ideally, I was looking to set up something in Waiuku at that stage, or Papakura, just in terms of the driving, in terms of my own children and their needs. And at that stage, they said, no, you know, we've got too much that we are trying to establish here. Now, very soon after that, Tahongana was established in South Auckland. And Tahongana really ended up developing as a bicultural group of family therapists.
Oh, fantastic.
And that is now in Mahia Road in South Auckland. So I worked at Leslie Centre. It was at the time of developing the SAFE program. So I had colleagues very involved with the SAFE program and the SAFE adolescent program, so sexual offenders program, and had colleagues working on a sexual abuse victims team at with families at Leslie Centre. So I worked and got my ACC registration, and then I started having people in South Auckland say, come to South Auckland, we need an ACC registered therapist. And I ignored that for quite a while, and then started to think it would be so much easier to not be travelling so far. And so ended up going to working at Manurewa Baptist.
All right, yes.
Which is now ISSC. And, you know, all the time that I was working, Waiuku Family Support was developing. So I was doing little bits there, but really the reality is that Jeanette and I started it.
Yes.
We didn't, you know, we weren't hugely involved once it got going. It developed on its own. And Jeanette moved on to other projects.
Right.
And we pretty much helped out where we could. I think Jeanette went on to the board for a while. Don't think I did. Can't really remember. You know, we were
it is 35
busy.
years ago. Yes.
We were busy, and you know, I was sort of like the second ACC registered therapist in South Auckland. So it was nothing to be seeing 7 families a day.
Wow, that's a huge workload.
Which was huge. And all around sexual abuse, and working with families and having one child disclose about abuse, and then looking around the other children and asking them very gently, and what about you? And finding that there were whole families where children were being abused. So worked there for, I suppose, 18 months, and then cut down to 3 days and started my own private practice. Started 2 days in private practice, and that just, there was just such a huge need. And I mean, the difficulty was there was a huge need, but there wasn't the money for the need. So trying to balance ACC work with working with families where there wasn't sexual abuse, but there was huge need.
Yes.
And I mean, very soon I just had to concentrate on ACC work because, the reality was that we had a mortgage, and it was quite good to be able to pay a mortgage and feed your family. And it was, often that sort of situation. So ACC was paying and paying regularly, and there was, it was a black hole.
Yes.
Very black hole.
Yes.
And sadly to say, I've been in private practice for 25 plus years. I would have seen probably 1,000 clients in that time. And ACC changed their way of working 8 years ago, and developed what they called supplier providers through integrated services for sensitive claims. So I'm a supplier. So I had 26 odd people all doing ACC work.
Wow.
Out of Takanini Villa. So, so there's 2 of us running that. I do the sort of clinical oversee, read all the reports before they go to ACC. I have a wonderful arts therapist that does a lot of the admin work. IT is not my thing.
I can relate.
And IT is her thing. So she does all the admin, and I do a clinical overseas. So my job now is, I have a small clinical load, but hey, retirement's not far away for me. But my work is now consultation.
This is a sideline question, and it's a personal curiosity. Has there always been the need in society for the work that you're doing and we're doing at Waiuku Family Support now, or is this a new modern invention? And is it growing?
It's not a new modern invention. I mean, interestingly enough, early on, I've had my finger in a number of different things along the way. And obviously with adopted children, I was asked to talk at Bethany and open adoption. We were very clear that our children should know their genetic heritage, should have their language if they could, that they needed to know where they came from, that this was not, that it should not be closed. So I don't think we were the first people to suggest that, but you know, certainly the law is very much still that adoption is closed. So sort of standing up and going against the law meant that we were asked to talk about open adoption and what that meant. So, you know, one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was to look back into the Bethany records that went back, you know, into the early 1900s. And, you know, they had a ledger of about, I suppose, about 30 lines to the page, maybe more. And of all the young women who had come in to have their babies at Bethany, some who'd kept their babies, some who had adopted their babies, and our second little boy came through Bethany. And page after page after page was incest. And you will know that so many of the young women were hidden away.
Yes.
You know, sent to auntie and uncle, hidden while they had their babies, and then their babies were taken from them.
That's what I grew up with. We always, Dad being a minister, I can't remember a time when there wasn't some young mum and staying at our place till she had her baby. And yes. I can remember as a young kid challenging Mum and Dad about, are we doing the right thing for that child?
Yes. By
taking it away from its mother. And I still have that serious question marks over all that.
Absolutely. You know, our sons now are adults. Eldest is 40. And, you know, their own journeys into their whānau. And, you know, it's not been easy for them, no. Even though they've been in open adoptions. It's not been easy for them. And I suppose that one of the things that we have seen as Pākehā parents growing up with Māori children, our second son was an amazing sportsman. And him and our daughter became rep hockey players.
Wow.
And, you know, that was over to Pukekohe pretty much every night, being the taxis and being the people, you know, and my husband did a lot of that. But, you know, all day Saturday, most of Sunday, we'd be there calling out for them. Now, we would see teams coming without any Māori children in them. And our second son was a really big boy. Mm-hmm. He's, you know, 6'6" and
wow, that's tall.
Not quite 6'6" around, but almost. He's a big man, and he was a big boy at 12. And you know, we would hear people from the parents from the other team get that Māori boy off, because they'd look around and they'd see no Māori parents. Get that Māori boy off. He can't be 12.
It's a hidden part of our history, isn't it? And it's disgusting.
It is terrible. And, In reality, what we used to do is my husband would stand one side and I would stand the other side, because we had a daughter and a son in that team. And our daughter was hearing us as well as our son. And, things like black boy, get that black boy out. It was horrendous. And so we would stand up and say, that is our son.
Yeah.
How dare you speak about him? He won awards for being Sportsman of the Year. He'd stop and put his hockey stick down and pick kids up off the other team. But, I suppose because we have been in a very privileged, honoured position, we have seen what it's like for Maori children to grow up and to challenge that. And
it's got to be challenged.
To challenge that at school, pretty much at high school, to say, look, this is not an even playing field.
It never has been.
No. And I can feel my rage around it now,
Well, did you watch that documentary this week? I've read the book. One lady gave me the book a couple of months ago, and it was a page a day to read it, because I just getting so angry with what I was reading, because it was so scientifically done. It wasn't up for dispute, and I thought, this isn't the New Zealand that I thought. But as I said to you before, I was in the police, and I now belong to a couple of old coppers closed Facebook groups.
Yes.
And it's really neat that this week those Maori cops that I knew and worked with and always admired and respected are now coming out and describing what it was like for them.
Yes, good.
And I thought, this is shameful that went on.
Yes.
At any level in the job, and some of the stuff that they encountered. And we've sort of caught into a mythology in New Zealand, and I think it's actually been a harmful mythology, that we're leaders in race relations. And I actually think we're anything but.
Oh, absolutely. I think racism is alive and unwell.
It is.
And, there are apologies that need to be made in all directions.
100%.
As you can see, in terms of my life, Waiuku Family Support was just a little part of it, and getting that going and encouraging it. And over the years, I've supervised people, counsellors who've been at Waiuku Family Support, and doing that at the moment. It has gone from strength to strength.
It has, and as I said before we went to air, that's the ancestry that those of us who are working in it now have inherited.
Yes.
Is that, and I was thrilled to hear that bicultural thing was in the mindset right from dot one, because we cannot operate as part of Aotearoa New Zealand and not do that, in my opinion.
No.
It's absolute. We can't have the haves and the have-nots at any level.
No, but we have.
We have. It's our reality. It's our reality. And but until you actually face up as a community and take ownership of your reality and pull your heads out of the sand and say, it's uncomfortable pulling my head out of the sand and what I'm seeing, we cannot start to make constructive steps forward.
I think uncomfortable is a really good word, because there is a need to look at what each of us has done to keep racism going.
I agree.
And being able to look at our own faults, look at what we have done. I know I watched the pukekohe film with my youngest son the other night, and sort of said to him, "What's this like for you to
good question,
to sit here and see this?" And he said, "Mum, I've always known it, and Waiuku has been the same. You know, it is. I've always known it." And you know, one of the things that really surprised me was, you know, if I go back into our family story, was that I think I said to you when my eldest son was at Waipipi school, and all the kids went through Waipipi school, I applied and got elected to the board. Now, the farmer down the road from where we were living came down to see me and said, "I hear that you have just been elected to the board." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I have. I'm really not sure what I'm getting myself into. You know, it's all very new ground, but yes, I have." And he said, "That is amazing." And I said, "Well, why is it amazing?" He said, "Because you're not old stock. You don't belong to, you're new to the area." And I said, "Oh, you know, does that make a difference?" And he said, "It makes a huge difference." And I suppose some of those things were some of the things that, as you know, the new Waiuku Family Support had to look at and stay with that kaupapa. Everybody has something to give.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We mustn't go away from those basic foundations.
No.
We'd destroy the organisation if we did.
Yes. And of course, some people have specialties in some areas because they have been lucky enough to be resourced to have training. You know, I certainly wouldn't like to sit with someone and help them do a budget. I've not done that training.
And it is, as you're right, it's highly specialised. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So it's sort of around how do people step forward with the knowledges they have and share them. And that's really what we did.
See, for me, and maybe I'm a bit idealistic about my childhood, but I grew up in rural New Zealand. You know, Waihi was the metropolis when we shifted there. I never lived in anywhere so big.
Yes.
Because Dad was a home missionary, so we were isolated. I was talking to people the other day, when I was 4 months old, we shifted to Mangere because that was a remote station. It was
right.
It's hard to comprehend nowadays when it's swamped by houses and everything. But the sense of community, and you know, I was at a funeral yesterday that I took, and we were chatting about how did everybody of our generation and above meet, and it was always community dances and things like that that we don't have anymore.
No.
We've somehow.
No, we don't.
I can't put my finger on how we've killed the sense of community.
Yeah.
And it's as a community that you actually find the strength, because everyone has their little uniqueness, and if you bring that in, you've got a strong waka to paddle.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we moved from the Awhitu Peninsula to Drury after our children had finished at Waiuku High School, and we've just sold our place at Drury and are living in Waihi now.
Oh wow!
And which is
which
another
part?
Connection.
Little wee planet, this.
Yeah, just down on the near the river.
Oh yes,
Hanemutu River, and
I used to fish there.
Ah, okay. So we have the rail trail has just been extended right round our property, which is rather lovely. And
wow,
people wave out People stop and talk. And Drury, we have growers either side of us, lovely people, roses one side and cucumbers the other, and just lovely people. But everyone is very busy. I stay at our property just in a caravan on the nights that I'm in Auckland, when I'm at Takanini, and but I don't get there till 8 o'clock at night because I'm working from 7 till 8. It's long days. It doesn't seem like people have a job anymore. They have a job plus, or they don't have a job.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It fears me that the working culture is becoming more like what Japan did, and their suicide rates went through the roof because you were just robots working like, ridiculous hours. There was no private life,
No.
and that goes on in good parts of the world. But New Zealand seems, for some weird reason, wanting to go down that path when what we have is the opportunity to be unique and not be down that path.
I've done a lot of training overseas and various times, and I see that New Zealand is following America, sadly.
Yes, tragically.
We're about 10 years behind, and it would be great if we could just go, stop.
Let's be New Zealand. Let's be unique.
Because certainly in terms of the critical edge training that I've done, and have to in the field of sexual abuse, there is a real concern about what is being seen here that was being seen in America 10 years ago. So, unless we can come back to community and that everyone is of value and that everyone has something to give,
yes,
we're in big trouble.
And everyone's worth listening to.
Yes.
And you raised that point quite early in the piece, and I strongly agree with it. We've lost the ability to listen to each other's stories.
Yes.
And that's just not right.
No. I think that we have a very big and growing underbelly to society that scares most people.
It scares me because having started it, and they've got another one not in over there. I started in the police in 1972, and the world is just. At the funeral I was at yesterday, one of the granddaughters is a current police woman, and what she's dealing with and what I dealt with in my time, it's just like we're talking two different languages.
Absolutely.
And I feel for her. I really wouldn't like to be in the police in this day and age. It's the complexity of society is just, and I can't see where it's going, except for down a slippery slope. It's not going on an upward curve, from my opinion.
Yes, I think you're right, and I have faith in our younger generations to be looking at things very seriously and bringing new ideas to the table, just as we did.
And we must. I watch my grandchildren, and I love the relationship and their ideas and what they want to do, and that they want to have a positive impact on the world. And I thought we must never stop young kids.
No.
Because the society is a good way of knocking it out of you, tragically.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you don't start out with the idealism and everything they've got, but you're going to be cynical when we get into our 70s and 80s being cynical, they're going to be there in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah. And I think, sort of going back to racism, because I think that's incredibly important.
It's vital.
You know, I think back to my children being young. So our eldest son is Asian Maori, straight here, yeah. Very tiny. Our next son is Maori European, big boy, black curly hair. Our daughter was very white. In fact, we sort of nicknamed her Purcell when I was pregnant. And, you know, she had a mop of white curly hair, blonde curly hair. So, you know, as a family, we would have this little blondie, this obviously Maori boy, and this boy that had Asian features. And, you know, I can remember going into the supermarket one day with the kids, and or the two youngest ones, the other one was in kindy, and having a woman saying, older woman, one so fair and one so dark, and me thinking, how do I reply to this? And I said, well, you know, when you have different fathers, you have different,
yes.
you have different children. I didn't tell them they also had different mothers.
No, business.
But, you know, the reality that was like that. And, you know, as my youngest son went to kindy, as I said, he was a big boy, and of course I would have, you know, our youngest daughter with us, and if you think about what a kindy's like, you go into a kindy session, and you know, everything's laid out on different tables. Yes. You can do this on that table, and I went in with when my youngest son started, and you know, was trying to help out, and my little girl was being pretty naughty, you know. She was going from one table to another and, you know, mixing up the paints here, and, you know, nothing said about that at all. She was blonde. Yeah. And she was fair. Yes. And my little boy was sitting on the floor, and I had gone up into the doll's corner to sort of fold the clothes up. You know, the mothers have to do all the things. And he saw me there, and he got up on his knees and went, "Hello, Mummy." He got told off for doing that.
I look back, like you say, you've got to take ownership for yourself, and some of the things and I'm thinking, how did I not see that? And, you know, the conversations I'm having with my Māori policeman friends at the moment, I just sit there and thinking, I mean, say there's about a dozen that I'm really good mates with, that I, for the first time in the last few years, started to learn their Māori, realised they had a Māori name.
Yeah.
And I thought, how can you go through your life and not be allowed to use your name? That's part of your identity.
Absolutely.
And I was not, and I feel annoyed at myself that I didn't think to check and say, have you got another name? I just accepted that they were using Pākehā names.
Yeah. You know, I remember at one stage when the kids were teenagers, and we'd gone out to a friend's, probably was a 50th birthday out for an evening, and all the teenagers there sort of ate their meal, and then they went for a walk, because they really didn't want to be around the adults, as you can imagine. And my son got stopped by the police. What are you doing here? You know, none of the other kids got asked because they were blonde. Pākehā, and he sort of came back to the restaurant and said, Mum, the police are asking me what I'm doing, and I just went for a walk with the others. I'm just with the others, but none of the others got asked.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the unconscious bias that they're talking about on the police at the moment.
yes.
And it's an unconscious bias.
Yes.
And they're doing it, they're not even aware of they're doing it, because you are told these are the people who commit the crime.
Yeah, well,
and yet, I look back on my arrest record. When I was in the police, I arrested more white people than Maori people. But,
yes.
but I'm not putting myself up there as a saint. I still look back and can't comprehend why it worked out. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But the majority that were going through the cells were Maori. That was the bottom line tragic reality.
Yeah. Well, I suppose working in the field of sexual abuse, one of the things that I get asked again and again is, are you mainly working with Maori or Pacific Island or Tauiwi?
No.
It's pretty much a third.
Yes, that would be my guess.
And so many people have trauma in their lives. And, it takes a long time to move from that trauma. But the thought that is out there is this is more in Maori community.
No. Look, there's absolutely wonderful Maori people in the community. But they... In fact, in some levels, I put them more wonderful because we're starting to learn more recently of what it's been like for them growing up. For them to be as gracious and nice as they are actually puts them a few pegs higher, in my opinion, than a lot of us others.
Yes, absolutely. There was this lovely, lovely Maori woman when we started at Waiuku Family Support, Jenny. And Jenny was a volunteer, and she used to come along and she said, I haven't got much to give. And I'm sort of thinking, you're a grandma and you're raising grandchildren, you have your moko, you have your own children. But she'd come along and she said, but the one thing I can give a hug to everyone who's here.
I like that.
And it was beautiful. It grounded us all because we were all working really, really hard. And she would come in and she would say, I could do that much. And so it was around each of us looking at, we had maybe that much time to give or that much energy to give, and looking at how we appreciated that. So, yeah, awesome.
I actually think the world is shifting. And I mean that seriously. I got 2 undergraduate degrees in history. I'm always passionate about it. But the world is moving numerically to a brown world of people, is the reality. And but we're moving away from the English European economic model. And that's, I know Russia has white people in it, but there's actually more brown people in Russia than white people. It's only in certain parts of Russia do they have it. But China is growing. India is the fastest growing population still globally. And they bring a different view of how society should operate.
Yes.
And I think it's time that others stood back and said, maybe our model hasn't been as good as we'd like to kid ourselves.
Well, we certainly know that in grief, don't we?
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.